let's talk about energy now. You know, we used to have the cheapest energy costs anywhere in the world. In fact, we had so much electricity here in Queensland that I almost had to give it away about 40 years ago, giving subsidies to homes to put air conditioning units to hang them off the houses. Heavens above. Now we have the most expensive electricity. It seems like the Australian government has absolutely no plan to get us back in the position that we were that time a generation ago. It's chasing a climate emergency mirage. It's fast becoming a nightmare. Joining me now, National Senator for Queensland, Matt Canavan. Happy New Year to you, Matt. This mob in Canberra, you know, they've revealed today, in the Australian, of course, that the New South Wales coal-fired power stations are likely to receive more than $500 million in taxpayer-funded compensation for projected losses caused by coal price caps, this thought bubble of the Prime Minister before Christmas. And, of course, that's in addition to a similar amount that's being thrown at the Queensland government, going to mining companies in Queensland. I mean, this Australian government, they're spending literally billions of dollars of our money, taxpayers' money, and it's all going to cover up the real impact of this ludicrous electricity policy.
Well, you're absolutely right, Gary, and to put these figures in context, because often when we talk about billions and trillions, it sort of boggles the mind, but to put them in context, the government last year, to great fanfare, announced that it would subsidise low-income people's power bills to the tune of $1.5 billion. So it was putting $1.5 billion towards helping low-income people get across this suffering of high power prices. And then now it's only revealed after all the price caps went through, after legislation was rammed through the parliament in just one day's sitting, it's now revealed that actually coal companies are going to get over $1 billion, almost the same amount of subsidy. And so when you balance up these two things, and hey, Gary, I'm a big supporter of the coal industry. I think it does great things for our nation. It's our nation's biggest export. Again, bigger than iron ore, by the way. You don't hear that too much, especially on the ABC, but it's the nation's biggest export. Great industry, full of great people. I don't think they deserve $1 billion of your taxpayers' dollars. I'm happy to help out those on low incomes. Happy to help out them. But the fact that we're actually helping out coal companies who are making a mozza right now around the world, because the rest of the world's been mad to close down coal production, that we're giving them $1 billion. We're going to only find about the same amount for the low income, the suffering among us. That's just hopeless. And this new government's all over the place because it is, and I watched Top Gun Maverick the other night with my wife, it's trying to cash checks that its body can't cash. It's trying to write checks so its body can't cash. You know, it just cannot deliver on the promises that it took to the last election. It's desperately failing about now to find a solution.
Yeah, well, as Bronwyn Bishop would say, as Margaret Thatcher did say, you know, socialists go all right till they run out of other people's money. But look, all these deals, you know, Matt, they were made by the state governments, right? The state premiers all huddled together. Oh, yes, it's going to hurt, but we'll do it. Supposedly on the premise that it was going to result in a lower power price for households. But we're footing the bill as taxpayers. So here's the deal. Taxpayer subsidies will create a lower power price. The Queensland Competition Authority, well, they've found that, in fact, Queenslanders are now paying nearly 30% more for electricity than any other state. I mean, there's a hell of a lot of coal in the ground here in Queensland. There's no end in sight to this lunacy. We've got to start calling it out, Matt.
Well, when Anthony Albanese turned up a couple of weeks before Christmas, I think the state premiers thought Santa had come early for them, because a lot of the problems we've got in our energy systems is because of their actions, is because they have failed to invest in reliable power. They're largely in charge of the energy networks and energy systems in our country. But Anthony turned up with a big checkbook with big promises, and they were happy just to wash their hands and let him take it over and say, well, it's your energy market now, Anthony, you fix it. And look, the basic, if we're not going to diagnose the problem here properly, we're not going to prescribe the right solutions. The problem is we do not have enough reliable power. And we can become all ideological about renewables or coal or all these other things, but put it aside, we do not have power systems available now that can be relied on 24 hours a day. We've invested far too much in power systems which only turn on based on the weather conditions. That's not acceptable in an industrial economy. People expect their electricity to be on at 24 hours a day, and therefore we need to match those demands with supply that can be on 24 hours a day. Now, none of the price caps, subsidies, any of these policies, they're all just a short-term band-aids and distractions from the longer term problem of bringing on more reliable supply. That's what the government should be focused on, and it just has no policy to do that right now.
No, and the long-term thinking, which is completely absent, and I must say during the previous government's time there wasn't enough of it. We saw a few little gems pop out, but state governments slow everything down. I mean, the Queensland government is the example I can think of. They constantly re-announce the same project that's already been announced using federal funds that they hold on to for 8 years before they build anything. And power stations are not rebuilding those coal-fired power stations, not even looking at the idea of small modular reactors from a nuclear energy point of view. I mean, Italy, one of the great industrial countries of the world, it said this renewable thing just doesn't generate what we need to keep our factories going. Why aren't we putting Australia first?
Well, you're totally right, Gary. I mean, unfortunately, we have a Prime Minister now who cut his teeth marching against nuclear in the 1980s, and he seems to be still stuck there 40 years on, railing against, nuclear treaties and what have you around the world, when, as you say, the rest of the world's actually adopting nuclear power, including countries like Italy, which had been a complete holdout on nuclear power until very recently. So the results are there for all to see. Those countries that haven't invested in reliable power solutions end up deindustrialising, end up losing their manufacturing industries and paying through their teeth for power. So if we want to end up like Italy, if we want to end up like Europe, let's just keep doing what we're doing. But instead, I don't think Australia wants to go down that path, especially in the region with the threats we face in our region. We need to keep our manufacturing industry. So we need to invest in reliable power. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with building coal or gas fired power stations, but if that's not your thing, at the very least, go with nuclear because it's off the shelf. Instead, we've got these madcap, harebrained ideas like the Queensland government recently wants to spend $60 billion on a variety of pumped hydro pie in the sky schemes. They announced $10 billion for a pumped hydro scheme just north of where I'm coming from you here, Gary, in North Queensland. They did not visit the site first. They have done no geotech studies. They've just announced a media release and $10 billion of your money without a single foot being put on the ground to decide whether this is actually a good site to put a whole lot of water above a town. This is just totally insane. And it feels like a bad dream that we need to wake up from. I'm just worried that we're going to lose a lot of industries. A lot of people will hurt before we do awake from this nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. Short-term thinking, all about managing the message. Now let's turn to the topic of infrastructure. The government seems to have time and time again refused to build those desperately needed dams to control floodwaters where possible, and of course can keep water for farmers to produce more food. I've been on about this for years and years. Right now, far west of Western Australia, we're seeing some real impact. Parts of northwestern Western Australia cut off by floods for more than a week now. I know the rain falls there. There's been that monsoonal rain. It tends to happen each year. So actually coming up with a plan would be good, but government's given up on long-term nation building, Matt.
Well, Gary, I think you were rightly critical of the former coalition government's energy policies there. I've been critical, so I'm not being partisan here with this comment, but I do think one achievement of the coalition government in the last 10 years was to bring dams back onto the agenda. And, in some good news, we're going to have the Rookwood Weir complete in the next few months. That'll start filling up with water, hopefully next year if it rains. And it'll massively expand double agricultural production in the Fitzroy Basin here in central Queensland. But we have been frustrated with a lot of other plans. Again, the state governments are heavily responsible, of course, for rivers and water. We need them to come along with us. And we're very disappointed to see the Urana Dam now be put on ice because of lack of support from the new federal Labor government. You're right, exactly right about the West Australian situation. That's just one of the most depressing and sad things in our country. There are so many good dam sites and huge rivers there in Western Australia, but governments of both political persuasions have ruled those out under pressure from green and environmental activist groups in the last few years. And it's amazing, so many Australians seem to think the West and the northwest of our country is a desert. They seem to think the Simpson Desert extends all the way up to Broome. And hardly any of us have actually been there. And when you go there, it's actually a beautiful place of thousands of hectares of black soils, as I say, massive gorges and huge prospects for dam sites. It would be a wonderful agricultural area, but the Greenies have got there first and just said no to everything.
Yeah, it's awful. About 80% of our annual income comes from the area north of the Tropic of Capricorn, I'm told. Now, in politics, the economy is absolutely important. Managing it, getting it right, critical for small business entrepreneurs. The fundamentals, they're changing in the short term. International pressures, we're being told. But I feel that Treasurer Jim Chalmers is softening us up for something radical this calendar year. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, Gary, Treasury and the Treasurer, they're always desperate to improve the bottom line figures, and the lazy and easy way to do that is just to import more people. If we bring more people into Australia, that's more taxpayers, and that makes the budget look better. So that's exactly where some of these stories being planted about not having enough people in Australia. That's where it's coming from. And look, I'm all for we need to have a sensible migration policy in this country. We do have significant labour shortages in a number of industries that won't be filled just by domestic sources of labour. So we have to alleviate those. But at the same time, I don't want to see us return to the supercharged migration levels we had before COVID, which were exacerbating housing and infrastructure stresses, especially in our major cities. We should make sure that we make decisions on migration for the benefits of all Australians, not just for the budget bottom line, not just for how good taxes look, but how good